The galaxy was vast and mysterious, full of wonders that defied imagination. Among its stars and swirling nebulas, countless civilizations thrived, each one stranger than the last. But none were more unique or more feared than the species known as the Vili. Towering, with deep blue skin that shimmered under starlight and glowing patterns that pulsed with their emotions, they were both mesmerizing and monstrous to most other species. Tales of their immense strength and primal ferocity had kept them isolated for centuries. NYX was a Vili, but unlike her kin, she did not revel in the terror her presence inspired. At a diminutive 4 feet tall by her people's standards, she was an anomaly, an outcast among a species known for their towering stature. Her small size had always set her apart, and not in the way she'd hoped. Among her own kind, she was mocked for her stature. Among other species, she was still considered terrifying. Her glowing blue skin and piercing golden eyes were enough to strike fear into even the bravest. Yet, NYX carried a quiet longing in her heart. She yearned for connection, for someone who could look past her alien features and see the being beneath. But the galaxy was not a kind place for someone like her. It didn't matter that she was gentle, that she had spent years studying the cultures and languages of other species. To them, she was still a Vili, a monster born of legend. And to her own people, she was weak, a runt unworthy of their respect. So NYX did what she had always done, she hid. She lived in the shadows of the galaxy, far from bustling trade routes and glittering spaceports, on a small, uncharted moon covered in lush, alien flora. Here, she could be alone, away from the judgmental eyes of the galaxy. Her days were spent exploring the moon's bioluminescent forests, cataloging its strange wildlife, and dreaming of a life she knew she could never have. That is, until the human arrived. It happened one ordinary evening, the sky above her moon painted with streaks of pink and orange as the twin suns set. NYX had been gathering data on a herd of luminous creatures she'd dubbed glowbacks when she heard the unmistakable hum of a starship breaking through the atmosphere. Her heart quickened. Visitors were rare, almost unheard of. Her moon was supposed to be a secret, a place forgotten by the galaxy. She abandoned her research and rushed back to her dwelling, a small structure she'd built from the moon's natural materials, to observe the ship's landing. It was a clunky, utilitarian vessel, a stark contrast to the sleek, elegant ships of her own people. Human design, she realized with a start. Her bioluminescent markings dimmed instinctively, a reaction to the nervous energy coursing through her. Humans were unpredictable. Some were curious and kind, but others were dangerous. She had no idea which kind had just landed on her moon. Peering from behind a thick curtain of foliage, NYX watched as the ship's ramp lowered and a single figure emerged. He was tall, by her standards, but average for a human. Dressed in rugged explorer's gear, he had a weathered look about him, as though he'd seen his fair share of battles and heartbreak. His eyes, however, were bright with determination and, to NYX's surprise, a hint of awe as he took in the alien beauty of the moon. "Wow," the human muttered, his voice carrying through the still air. He ran a hand through his messy brown hair and let out a low whistle. "This place is incredible." NYX's curiosity warred with her caution. She knew she should stay hidden, wait for the human to leave. But something about him intrigued her. He didn't carry the arrogance or hostility she'd come to expect from outsiders. Instead, he seemed earnest, as though he truly appreciated the beauty of her moon. Against her better judgment, she decided to follow him. Keeping to the shadows, she trailed the human as he explored, her keen senses picking up every detail. He marveled at the bioluminescent plants, laughed in delight when a flock of glowbacks soared overhead, and carefully avoided disturbing the delicate ecosystem. It was clear he wasn't here to exploit or harm, he was here to learn, to understand. Hours passed, and NYX found herself growing bolder. She crept closer, her curiosity getting the better of her. But in her excitement, she miscalculated. Her foot caught on a root, and she stumbled, crashing into the underbrush. The human whipped around, his hand going to the small device on his belt, a weapon, no doubt. "Who's there?" he called, his voice firm but not unkind. "I mean no harm. I'm just an explorer." NYX froze, her heart pounding. She had two choices, run and hide, or reveal herself. The human's gaze scanned the shadows, his expression cautious but curious. Taking a deep breath, NYX stepped into the light, her bioluminescent markings glowing faintly in the dimness. The human's eyes widened as he took in her appearance. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, to NYX's surprise, he smiled. "Hello," he said, his voice gentle. I've never seen anyone like you before. You're beautiful." NYX blinked, unsure if she'd heard him correctly. Beautiful? No one had ever called her that before. She searched his face for signs of mockery but found none. Instead, his expression was one of genuine admiration. "You're not afraid of me?" she asked, her voice soft and melodic, though tinged with disbelief. The human shook his head. "Should I be?" NYX hesitated. "Most people are. My kind, we have a reputation." He chuckled, a warm, reassuring sound. "Well, I've never been one to trust reputations. My name's Marcus, by the way. What's yours?" "NYX," she replied cautiously. "It's nice to meet you, NYX," Marcus said, extending a hand. "I hope I'm not intruding on your home." NYX stared at his hand, unsure of what to do. Human customs were unfamiliar to her. Slowly, she reached out and placed her smaller hand in his. His grip was firm but kind, and she felt a strange warmth spread through her. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't recoiling from her touch. As the suns dipped below the horizon and the moon's bioluminescent landscape came alive, NYX and Marcus sat together, talking. She told him about the moon's ecosystem, its strange and wondrous creatures. He shared tales of his travels, his struggles, and his own sense of isolation as a lone explorer in the vast galaxy. By the time the stars filled the sky, NYX realized something she hadn't thought possible. She didn't feel like a monster in Marcus's presence. She felt seen. For the first time, hope flickered in her heart. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't last. The galaxy was still out there, vast and unkind. And sooner or later, it would come for them both. Marcus woke up to the soft hum of alien wildlife. The bioluminescent forest around him glowed faintly in the early morning light, casting a surreal blue-green hue over everything. He stretched, his makeshift camp nestled beneath the towering trees. It took him a moment to remember where he was, and then the memory of last night came flooding back. NYX. She wasn't like anything he had encountered before. Her glowing markings, her inquisitive gaze, and the way she spoke equal parts caution and curiosity had left a deep impression on him. He had spent years wandering the galaxy, meeting beings from every corner, but no one had ever quite captured his attention like she had. The sound of rustling leaves brought his thoughts to an abrupt halt. He turned his head sharply, his hand instinctively reaching for his belt where his weapon rested. But it was NYX who emerged from the dense foliage, her smaller frame almost blending into the shimmering light around her. Her glowing golden eyes met his, and she tilted her head slightly, an expression of curiosity. "Good morning," Marcus said, relaxing his grip on the weapon. He stood up, brushing dirt off his jacket. "I wasn't sure if you'd come back." NYX hesitated before responding. "I wanted to see if you were still here," she admitted, her voice as soft as the forest breeze. "Most people leave when they see what I am." Marcus gave her a reassuring smile. "Well, I'm not most people." They stood there for a moment, the silence between them not awkward but charged with unspoken questions. Finally, NYX gestured for him to follow her. "There's something I want to show you," she said, her markings glowing faintly with what Marcus assumed was excitement. He didn't hesitate. Grabbing his gear, he followed her deeper into the forest. The path was winding and uneven, but NYX moved with the grace of someone who knew every inch of this moon. Marcus, on the other hand, struggled to keep up, occasionally tripping over roots or brushing against glowing plants that left faint traces of bioluminescent powder on his clothes. "Where are we going?" he asked after what felt like an hour of trekking. NYX glanced over her shoulder, her lips curving into a small, enigmatic smile. "You'll see." They finally arrived at a clearing, and Marcus stopped in his tracks, his breath catching in his throat. Before him stood an enormous tree, its trunk so wide it could have housed an entire human settlement. Its branches reached high into the sky, and from every leaf hung tiny glowing orbs, like stars captured in a net. The air around it felt alive, thrumming with an energy Marcus couldn't quite describe. "This is the heart tree," NYX said, her voice reverent. "It's the oldest living thing on this moon. My people believe it holds the memories of our ancestors." Marcus approached the tree cautiously, his fingers brushing against its bark. It was warm to the touch, and for a brief moment, he felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. "It's incredible," he murmured. NYX watched him closely, her markings pulsing faintly. "This tree is why I stayed here," she admitted. "It's a part of me. When I feel lost, I come here, and it reminds me of who I am." Marcus turned to her, his expression softening. "And who are you, NYX?" She hesitated, looking down at her hands. "A monster, according to most of the galaxy," she said bitterly. "Even among my own people, I don't belong. I'm too small, too different." "You don't seem like a monster to me," Marcus said gently. "You seem like someone who's been dealt a rough hand but hasn't let it break her." NYX looked up at him, her golden eyes wide. For a moment, she didn't say anything, and Marcus wondered if he'd said the wrong thing. But then she smiled, a small, hesitant smile that lit up her face. "You're strange, for a human," she said. "I'll take that as a compliment," Marcus replied with a grin. They spent the rest of the day at the heart tree, NYX showing Marcus its secrets. She explained how the orbs glowed brighter when touched by someone with a strong emotional connection and demonstrated by placing her hand on one. The orb flared to life, casting a warm, golden light over them. Marcus tried it as well, but the orb only glowed faintly under his touch. "It responds to those who belong here," NYX explained. "You're not of this moon, so it doesn't recognize you." "Fair enough," Marcus said. "But it's still beautiful." As night fell, they made their way back to Marcus's camp. The walk was quieter this time, but it was a comfortable silence. NYX seemed more at ease, her markings glowing softly as they walked side by side. When they reached the camp, Marcus built a small fire, and they sat together, sharing stories. NYX spoke of her people, of their strength and beauty, but also their rigid traditions and harsh judgments. Marcus shared tales of his travels, of the wonders he'd seen and the dangers he'd faced. They laughed, they listened, and for the first time in a long while, they both felt a sense of connection. But as the fire crackled and the stars above glittered like diamonds, a shadow passed over NYX's face. "Marcus," she said hesitantly, "why are you here? On this moon, I mean." Marcus hesitated, his gaze flickering to the fire. "I'm looking for something," he admitted. "A place that feels like home. I've spent so much of my life wandering, never staying in one place for too long. I thought maybe this moon could be it." NYX's markings dimmed slightly, a sign of her unease. "And what happens if others find this place? People who don't care about its beauty, who only want to exploit it?" Marcus met her gaze, his expression serious. "Then I'll protect it," he said firmly. "I won't let anyone destroy what makes this place special." NYX studied him for a long moment before nodding. "I hope you mean that," she said softly. As the night deepened, they both lay down to rest, the fire burning low. But while Marcus drifted off to sleep, NYX stayed awake, her mind racing. She wanted to believe him, to trust that he wouldn't bring harm to her sanctuary. But the galaxy was full of broken promises and shattered dreams. And though she felt a strange and growing connection to this human, she couldn't ignore the fear that one day, everything she held dear might be taken from her. Unbeknownst to either of them, eyes were watching from the shadows, glowing faintly in the darkness. They weren't alone on this moon, and the danger was closer than either of them realized. The next morning, the air on the moon felt heavy, almost charged with an unspoken tension. NYX's glowing patterns flickered faintly as she paced near Marcus's camp. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Her senses, honed by years of living in solitude, were rarely mistaken. The forest seemed quieter than usual, the usual hum of bioluminescent insects replaced by an uneasy stillness. Marcus emerged from his tent, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Morning," he said groggily, but his cheer faded as he noticed the furrow in NYX's brow. "What's wrong?" "We're not alone," she said, her voice low. Marcus tensed, his hand instinctively moving to his belt where his weapon rested. "You're sure?" NYX nodded. "I felt it last night, but I wasn't certain. Now I am. Someone's here. Watching us." Marcus scanned the tree line, his eyes narrowing. "Could it be your people?" She shook her head. "No. If they knew I was here, they'd have confronted me already. Vili don't skulk in shadows. Whoever it is, they're not from my kind." "Then we need to find out who they are and what they want," Marcus said. NYX hesitated. The thought of leaving their sanctuary unsettled her, but Marcus was right. If someone had discovered this moon, their presence could mean trouble. She led him through the dense forest, her senses on high alert. As they moved, Marcus couldn't help but marvel at her agility. NYX moved like a shadow, silent and precise, her glowing patterns dimmed to blend in with their surroundings. He, on the other hand, felt like a lumbering giant, every step he took a potential misstep. "How do you do that?" he whispered as they crept through the underbrush. "Do what?" she asked, glancing back at him. "Move like you're part of the forest. I feel like a rampaging beast next to you." NYX allowed herself a small smile. "Years of practice. The forest teaches you to listen, to feel its rhythms. You're too focused on your own noise. Pay attention to the sounds around you instead." Marcus tried to follow her advice, his movements growing slightly more deliberate. He wouldn't call himself graceful, but he was definitely making less noise. They reached a small ridge overlooking a clearing, and NYX motioned for Marcus to stop. She crouched low, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the area. There, near the base of a large glowing tree, was a group of 3 figures. They wore sleek black suits that shimmered faintly, their faces obscured by helmets with reflective visors. They moved methodically, placing small devices around the clearing. "Scavengers," NYX muttered, her markings flaring briefly with anger. "They're setting up extraction equipment. They're going to strip the land of its resources." Marcus's jaw tightened. He'd encountered scavengers before. They were ruthless, driven solely by profit. Entire planets had been left barren in their wake. "We can't let them do this," he said. "But there are 3 of them, and they're armed." NYX's eyes gleamed with determination. "I'm not afraid of them." Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression serious. "I know you're strong, but we need a plan. Running in without one will just get us killed." She nodded reluctantly. "What do you suggest?" Marcus studied the scavengers for a moment before speaking. "We need to separate them. If we can pick them off one by one, we stand a chance. Do you think you can lure one of them away?" NYX's lips curved into a sly smile. "Easily." She moved before Marcus could say another word, slipping down the ridge with uncanny stealth. He watched as she circled the clearing, her glowing patterns pulsing faintly as she drew closer to the scavengers. One of them turned, catching a glimpse of her light in the distance. "What was that?" the scavenger said, his voice distorted through his helmet's comm system. "Probably some local wildlife," another replied. "I'm going to check it out," the first one said, pulling a sleek energy weapon from his side and heading into the forest. Marcus waited until the scavenger was far enough away before descending the ridge. He crept up behind the remaining 2, his weapon drawn. His heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. He needed to trust that NYX could handle her part of the plan. Meanwhile, NYX led the lone scavenger deeper into the forest. She moved just fast enough to keep him chasing her, her glowing patterns flickering like a will-o'-the-wisp. The scavenger cursed under his breath, firing blindly into the trees. NYX darted behind a massive trunk, waiting until he was close enough before pouncing. Her small size belied her strength, and the scavenger barely had time to react before she disarmed him. Pinning him to the ground, she hissed, her glowing eyes burning into his visor. "Why are you here?" she demanded. The scavenger struggled, but her grip was unyielding. We were tipped off about this moon," he stammered. "Said it was rich with resources. We didn't know it was inhabited, I swear." NYX's markings flared with anger. "Leave now, and never come back. If I see you here again, you won't leave alive." The scavenger nodded frantically, and NYX released him, watching as he stumbled back toward his ship. She returned to the clearing just in time to see Marcus confronting the other two. He had managed to disarm one, but the other had his weapon trained on him. "Drop it," the scavenger barked, his finger hovering over the trigger. Before Marcus could respond, NYX stepped into the clearing, her glowing patterns blazing brightly. The scavenger hesitated, clearly unnerved by her appearance. Taking advantage of the distraction, Marcus lunged forward, knocking the weapon from his hand. Within moments, the remaining scavengers were subdued. Marcus and NYX stood over them, their expressions grim. "You heard her," Marcus said. "Leave, and don't come back." The scavengers didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled to their feet and ran, disappearing into the forest. Marcus and NYX watched as their ship lifted off, its engines roaring as it disappeared into the sky. For a moment, the two of them stood in silence, the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. Finally, Marcus turned to NYX, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." NYX laughed softly, her markings dimming as the tension eased. "You did well, for a human." Marcus chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." But as they made their way back to the heart tree, both of them knew this was only the beginning. The scavengers might have been driven off, but the fact that they'd found the moon at all meant others could too. The sanctuary NYX had fought so hard to protect was no longer a secret, and the peace they had found was more fragile than ever. The days that followed were marked by an unspoken urgency. NYX and Marcus worked together to fortify the sanctuary, creating traps and barriers to deter any future intruders. Though the forest seemed to embrace their efforts, with its bioluminescent flora intertwining to shield the heart tree, NYX knew that the moon's fragile peace had been irreversibly disturbed. One evening, as they sat beneath the heart tree's radiant glow, Marcus broke the silence. "NYX, we can't keep this place hidden forever. Sooner or later, someone else will come. Scavengers, corporations, maybe even your own people. What do we do then?" NYX looked at him, her golden eyes reflecting the soft light of the tree. "I've spent my whole life hiding, Marcus. Hiding from my people, from the galaxy, from the fear that no one could ever see me for who I am. But meeting you has shown me something important." "What's that?" he asked, leaning closer. "That hiding isn't living," she said, her voice steady. "This moon deserves more than to be a secret. It deserves to be protected, yes, but also appreciated. Its beauty, its uniqueness, it can teach others so much. But if we keep it locked away, no one will ever understand why it matters." Marcus frowned. "But opening it up could also put it in danger. People don't always respect what they don't understand." NYX reached out, placing a hand on his. "That's why we have to be the ones to show them. To teach them. If we approach the right people, the ones who care about preservation and knowledge, we can build something here. A sanctuary, not just for this moon, but for anyone willing to learn and protect it." Marcus's expression softened, and he nodded. "You're right. I've seen too many places destroyed by greed, but I've also seen places saved by people who care. If we're careful, we can make this work." The decision made, they spent the next few weeks preparing. Marcus used his connections to reach out to an intergalactic preservation organization, one with a reputation for protecting fragile ecosystems. NYX, though hesitant, recorded messages explaining the significance of the heart tree and the moon's unique ecosystem, her voice carrying a blend of vulnerability and conviction. When the organization arrived, they were awestruck by the moon's beauty. Scientists, environmentalists, and diplomats marveled at the glowing forests, the delicate balance of its ecosystem, and, most of all, the heart tree. NYX stood at the center of it all, her glowing patterns a testament to her connection with the moon. Though she felt the weight of their stares, she held her head high, her confidence bolstered by Marcus's unwavering support. In the months that followed, the moon was officially declared a protected sanctuary. Structures were built with care, blending seamlessly into the natural landscape. Only a select few were allowed to visit, each one vetted and trained to respect the moon's delicate balance. NYX became the moon's guardian and ambassador, Her once isolated life transformed into one of purpose and connection. One evening, as the first stars appeared in the sky, Marcus and NYX sat together beneath the heart tree. The forest around them buzzed with life, the glow of its flora casting a soft light over their faces. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if I hadn't landed here?" Marcus asked, breaking the comfortable silence. NYX smiled, her markings pulsing gently. "All the time. I used to think my life would always be lonely, that I'd always be seen as a monster. But you showed me that sometimes, it takes an outsider to see the truth of who you are." Marcus chuckled. "And you showed me that even in the vastness of the galaxy, there are places worth fighting for. People worth fighting for." She leaned her head against his shoulder, her heart filled with a warmth she'd never thought possible. "The galaxy is vast and unkind," she said softly. "But it's also full of surprises. Meeting you was the best one of all." They sat there in silence, watching as the heart tree's glowing orbs shimmered like captured stars. And though the challenges ahead would be many, they faced them together, their bond a beacon of hope in an uncertain galaxy. Moral of the story ***, true connection and understanding can bridge even the vastest divides. By embracing vulnerability and seeking mutual respect, we can protect what is precious and foster harmony in a world or galaxy that often feels divided. It's not through hiding, but through courage and collaboration, that we find our true purpose and place.